This is Sonic is Alone, a short horror ROM hack of Sonic 1 that I made last year for Halloween. It was a small little thing I did between the development of my main project Sonic ERaZor version 7 and 8, and it took exactly 12 days to complete. Yet despite all of this, it quickly became the most popular thing I have ever made. At least when you go by raw YouTube numbers alone. Today is Halloween 2025 and it felt right to look back on this small little hack that has meant more to me than some people even realize. Now a quick warning up ahead. This video will be slightly self-indulgent because I will talk about a lot of details and what they meant to me as the author. But I hope you still walk away with some newfound appreciation of them. And if you haven't heard of Sonic is Alone yet, I've linked the download and a video walkthrough in the description below. Now then, let's begin. I was just wrapping up the production for the 7th version of Sonic ERaZor, which was the first big update of the game in 8 years. It was at a point in time where I was absolutely at a low point in my personal life. I don't want to go too much into detail here because I've already made an entire video about that depressing phase a while ago, so check that out if you want to hear all the context. The only thing that you need to know at this point is that I was absolutely depressed and also addicted to certain substances. Then one day I opened up my YouTube and saw a recommendation for something that caught my eye in a way that I haven't ever truly experienced before. A video showcasing Half-Life 2 Alone mod. I don't think I need to introduce you to Half-Life 2. It is one of the greatest games ever made. Running about, shooting bad guys and zombies, just having a grand old time. But now comes Alone mod. And it removes almost everything. No bad guys, no guns, no zombies, no Alex, no story, just nothing. The only thing is you and the world. And you know, I totally get that some people would probably say this is even below the base requirements to even call it a video game. After all, you basically just hold forward until you eventually reach the end, with no obstacles in the way or even a story. I could totally understand if some people said this was just a map pack for Garry's Mod or something. But here's the thing. The whole impact comes from a very specific feeling the mod taps into, and that is the feeling of nostalgia, mixed with what I like to call ambiguous comfort. Sure, if Half-Life 2 launched in this state, no way it would be remembered to this day. The wham factor only appears if you have actually played Half-Life 2 when you were younger. It is sort of a liminal space sort of deal, and yes, I know the term is overused in 2025, but come on, that's just what it is. It gives you that very special feeling that cannot be recreated by any other means. So that's why Half-Life 2 Alone mod became the highlight of the modding scene from that year to me personally. Now then, at this point in time, the mod is just a cool little thing that I've played with that sits in the back of my mind for a while and I move on with my day. Fast forward a couple weeks later and the Sonic Hacking Contest 2024 is live and running. And in it, next to Sonic ERaZor's big comeback with the version 7, there's a teeny tiny hack of Sonic 2 for the Sega Master System mixed into the bunch. Spin dash in Sonic 2 SMS. Notice how the A is spelled a little bit different. The name is incredibly unassuming, but that's very much the point. Spoilers, it's not just a hack that adds the spin dash, it's a horror hack. Except it's not really a horror hack either, at least not in the traditional sense. It's more of an unsettling and depressing experience. So here's some context for those of you who haven't played Sonic 2 SMS originally. Not only did the game infamously lack the spin dash ability, more importantly to our story, it lacks tails. Except not really either, because if you get the bad ending in the game, you will see this creepy cutscene where the music stops, the camera pans to the starry night sky and there's a zodiac thingy star constellation showing Tails. It is never fully explained, but the implication is that Tails is dead, and you let him die. Spin Dash in Sonic.exe SMS plays with that. It lures you in by writing a release page that makes it seem like all it does is add the missing ability. But then you boot it up and you get booted into the last stage of the game for some reason. One which is actually a pretty terrible and redundant place to even use the Spin Dash to begin with. So you go ahead and defeat Silver Sonic. And then the credits roll with the infamous Tails constellation showing up. Then it resets to the title screen. And something is off. Tails is no longer there on the title screen and various other small elements are missing. And then you begin the game again. And oh no. Everything is super mega ultra cursed. The music is slowed down to a crawl, the place is empty and Sonic can't die. And that right there, that exact moment, that's where I felt like I had the perfect idea in my head. It was a magical moment. I was playing through an empty Sonic 2 for the Sega Master System with zero challenge and nothing to do. And yet, that was the exact thing I was looking for to get an idea what to do with this whole alone stuff. Because it sold the vibe perfectly. Suddenly, I had everything I needed to get motivated to do something really creative. So a few days after Sonic ERaZor 7 was released, I started to begin working on a project codenamed Sonic 1 Alone Mod. I was mostly leaning into the Half-Life 2 Alone Mod sort of deal, but I was using the blueprints of Spin Dash and Sonic.2 SMS to get the vibe across that I was going for. That meant removing everything that feels like it's alive. First and foremost, badniks and enemies in any shape or form. But then I went further and removed everything else that had any kind of interactability. Rings, monitors, checkpoints, breakable platforms, signposts, you name it. I did try to be a bit more creative with some of the objects, such as the conveyor belts in Labyrinth Zone and the various machinery in Scrap Brain Zone, because having the place be essentially powered down felt just a bit more intriguing than just deleting it outright. You see, it was important for me that the game would not become so empty that it becomes essentially unfinished and boring, but rather have a constant dredge of unease. That's where I remember a TV tropes page that I liked a lot when reading it years ago. Nothing is scarier. It basically talks about the best way to sell your horror is not by showing anything at all. Instead, letting the human imagination run wild by giving just barely enough hints that something is off, but never actually showing off anything. Because the worst monsters are not the ones that are shown to you, but the ones in your mind. You see, and I know this is not a hot take anymore, but it needs to be said, I don't like Sonic.exe. It's this one neat little creepypasta from ages ago that blew up and became way too overexposed with clones, with every mom and Joe trying to make their own Sonic.exe at home. And the formula is always the same. Some character randomly wakes up somewhere dark and mysterious, then a big spooky monster appears with disfigured body and blood dripping from their eye sockets, and then it ends with the proclamations of being a god or whatever, followed by a gruesome death with jump scares and I invite you to take notice of this. All horror that's cliché and overdone is doing this exact thing. There's always a monster. Always. I guess horror game creators have no idea how to design something spooky without resorting to having a tangible villain being the reason for your dread. So I said, screw that. I went full in on the nothing is scarier approach on that whole thing. No monster, no villain, no hidden ARG, literally just exactly what you get. Nothing. Nothing in the most literal sense possible. Everything is removed where it was possible. Even failure itself was removed, with Sonic just bouncing right back up from a bottomless pit, as though death was rejecting Sonic to escape from this cursed place. Coming back to TV tropes again, this was inspired by the trope I have no mouth and I must scream. Look it up, it's a fascinating read. Anyway, when I was at this stage in development, I was a bit brick-walled. The game started incredibly basic, with just the slightly darker palette and the creepy music being the center of attention. It was pretty much exactly like Spin Dash in Sonic.2 SMS and Half-Life 2 Alone Mod combined, which, remember, was the very thing I sought out to do. But you see, I realized that it was simply not working at this point. The game doesn't have the same punch as Half-Life 2 Alone Mod because that source game is inherently more creepy to begin with. combined with the vastly different genre of an early 90s cartoon 2D platformer versus a mid-2000s M-rated first-person shooter, and you might see where the juxtaposition came from. So I had to rethink a few aspects. This was the low point of the development, and it took me another 4 days to continue working on it, as I was absolutely roadblocked. The solution came when I remembered a video I made a long time ago called "You Are in a Safe Place Where Harm is Absent." It is a 50-minute dark ambient track that is meant to be both comforting and uncanny. It sounded like this. And that's where I finally knew what I needed to do. Instead of just having the game be this perpetually empty world where nothing happens, I've decided to fully lean into the whole aspect of making the game technically a safe place where harm is absent, but at the same time constantly pushing the boundaries of that rule. The idea was then to not have everything be deleted already, like it is in the case of the Alone mod. Instead, I looked at the name for my main project, Sonic.exe, which is already named after a very cursed transformation of the word ERaZor. Unfortunately, Sonic.exe is already a game that exists, to everyone's dismay, so the name couldn't be taken. But I still knew I wanted to have erasing be a theme throughout the entire game. So I made it so that the individual objects that Sonic can interact with are getting erased one by one instead of having the objects gone from the start. Each time an object is touched, it gets deleted from the game forever, even after a hard reset because it's remembered in SRAM. Which is also very funny when people buy repro cards of this game because it means it is a one-time play and can never be played again. But that's another story for another time. The erasing stuff was pretty cool, but it was still not enough. So I looked back at the filter that makes the palette a bit darker and thought, what if I add even more different visual filters that make the game steadily darker each time a new object is erased? It was stuff like making the music more creepy, making the palette darker, adding a screen static, making Sonic black, making the entire game grayscale, and finally adding a shadow highlight mode, which is a feature inside the Sega Mega Drive which, for Sonic 1 specifically, already makes the game incredibly dark just by enabling it, so it was a pretty easy feature to add. And then I also added a small feature to make the game have a smaller screen space, so it looks just a little bit off. Once all filters are in place at the end of the game, it becomes one of the darkest possible games you've ever seen on a Mega Drive, in the most literal sense possible. To the point where many streamers often complain about it being just a bit too dark to even see anything anymore.
I'm just going to try something, guys, and this probably isn't going to work. Right, because the game is so dark, I'm struggling to see it with that light flash right in my eye, so I'm just turning the light off. I don't know if that works. That works really well. I'm glad it does.
But it adds to the atmosphere and I wouldn't have it any other way. If you can, play Sonic is Alone on an old CRT at 3 AM with all lights in your room out, and suddenly the darkness hits much different. As for the story, I knew it didn't need to be anything huge, it just needed enough to be a hook. After cold booting right to the final boss and landing the final blow on Eggman, the game glitches out and the erasing process begins. This is the only time the game will directly talk to the player, and that's all the story setup required to let the player get an idea. But there's more to that intro text than you might realize at first. Remember, I was absolutely at a low point in my life at that time. Creative and physical burnout from the year of working on ERaZor 7 combined with the substance abuse I mentioned earlier had me in a very dark place. I wasn't really meeting any friends anymore, nor really going outside to socialize at all. But I was still there at home every day working on a small, free indie fan game. Suddenly the whole project became even more than just a way to put Half-Life 2 Alone mod into Sonic 1. It became an outlet for my own frustrations and anxieties at the time. I know not everyone has worked on something for over a decade, but I do know that lots of artists can relate to the feeling I'm talking about. The one where you work on something for so long that you end up resenting it or feeling your own personality partially bleeding into the work. I was definitely feeling like that has happened to me here. So if you were confused by what the text at the beginning of Sonic is Alone means, the world is getting erased, you did this, will you finish the job? That is not just some cryptic text to get you hooked. That is literally me talking to myself. I wanted to have a reflection of what my life had become at that point and sort of base the game around that, because it helps me anchor myself to the past and also know I don't want to be in that place anymore. On a slightly related note, this is also why the infinite flight ability when pressing A exists, because it is directly lifted from Sonic ERaZor, where it's a feature called Inhuman Mode. For Sonic is Alone, in the source code I literally named it Discount Inhuman Mode, because I didn't think porting the small bullet effect as well would fit the vibe. But the effect is the same, an infinite double jump, which was necessary because the erasure of so many assets made certain parts of the level be soft lockable pretty easily. I narratively tried to make sense of it by making it a death on command, which showcases Sonic's inability to escape this dying world. This was already done for the bottomless pits, so adding the ability when pressing A was incredibly easy. Now let's talk about the ending. And first of all, it might shock you that there even is an ending, because I know a lot of people never found the ending. They just thought it would loop forever and ever with Eggman saying try again each time. But there's actually a hidden monitor inside a walled-off area in Scrap Brain Zone Act 3. I chose that location because it was basically just right there, but also because it was nice to have an escape be hidden in a very obscure place that most players wouldn't even ever think about. Admittedly, I might have gone too far with its obfuscation, as many players again weren't even aware there was an ending to begin with, but you live and learn. The really interesting part here is what I try to symbolically put into the game with this ending that's based on my own life. I think of this monitor, which lifts all the dark filters but doesn't restore anything erased, as acceptance. You cannot recover what once was lost, but you can return a bit of sunshine to lift the black clouds. Once again, talking about substance abuse here, this was a symbolical representation of going to rehab and getting your addiction under control. Because yes, I did actually go to rehab earlier this year and I have been clean since. I am not touching that stuff ever again. This also ties into the last thing that I want to talk about. Immediately after the hidden monitor is broken and the dark filters are lifted, Sonic can continue through the game as normal, and you will see that a giant ring appears at the end of every single level. While from a gameplay perspective I obviously want people to jump into it to see the credits, it was important to me that the players can still choose to run past those rings. I could have locked the camera so that jumping into the rings is the only option, but making it a choice was important to me from a narrative perspective, because it symbolizes temptation. If you jump into the ring, the game makes it so that Sonic is now permanently stuck inside that special stage, with no escape even when trying to mess with the out-of-bounds stuff. Once again, talking about addiction, this is supposed to represent relapse. And the thing about relapse is that it can often be even worse than when you first started. I've tried to quit numerous times before I went to rehab, and each time I managed to last a few days only to come back with an even higher consumption rate than ever before. It's a really vicious cycle, and the only winning move is to resist the temptation of just one more hit. Forever. So yeah, it's not an obvious ending and not officially explained at all, but to me personally, the best possible ending is Sonic acknowledging the giant rings exist, but choosing to simply walk past them every single time. Anyway, I think I've rambled on for long enough by now. But by now you can hopefully understand why this short little Sonic horror ROM hack meant so much more to me when I created it, and also why it still does even after an entire year. Most of the hacks I've created, I release, I have a bit of fun, and then I move on. But this one has stuck for me for so long because in some shape or form it helped me leave the worst parts of myself behind. A huge chunk of what the lowest point in my life was put into a little hack, kept as a permanent reminder of why I never ever want to return to that dark place. I will continue walking past the giant rings. I hope you do too. Thank you for watching. Have a nice Halloween, and I'll catch you around. Bye bye. Well, that would have been a great spot to end the video, wouldn't it? But a few things have come up that made me add this part at the end. What you've just watched was already written, recorded, edited, and even uploaded to YouTube quite some time ago in preparation for this year's Halloween. But then I posted a poll about an update to the hack and whether I should make it. I was actually low-key hoping that it would result in a majority vote for leave it as is. But as you can see, the overwhelming majority was in favor of an update. So yeah, let's talk about that because it's kinda relevant to the whole story. I should start by saying that this update doesn't majorly change anything about the actual game. It's mostly an attempt to fix a couple of soft logs that I saw many streamers fall into during this year's Sonic Hacking Contest. I also tried to mitigate a couple of confusions with a text at the start of the game teaching players about the infinite flight ability, and also making it a bit more explicit than just saying try again, that there is an ending to be found in the game somewhere. Here's the thing though, all of these changes are making me feel a bit self-conscious. Sonic.exe Alone was created a year ago during a time of mental health crises and addiction. Yet revisiting the game a year later while I'm sober and in a much better place mentally was still an enormous undertaking. Not from a technical standpoint or anything, but simply from an emotional one. Seeing my old code again and remembering the terrible place I was in at the time was rough to witness. It's actually kind of ironic how the development process of this update was pretty much the exact same as the original game, with me working on it for around 2 weeks and having a huge break in between because I was severely roadblocked again. This time not because of a lack of ideas, but simply the depression coming back just by exposing myself to this game again. It was burnout. Not from overworking, but from immense stress and self-doubt. It made me question whether this update was even worth it, whether this whole documentary was worth it, whether this entire Sonic.exe Alone project isn't just a gigantic exercise in self-indulgence, and whether I should be ashamed for trying to milk it for all it's worth. But you know, now that a few days have passed and I'm finally recording this amendment to the video, at the very least they allowed me to do some self-reflection. And somewhere in that reflection, I realized that I didn't want the story to end on doubt. If this project began in a dark place and was born out of pain, then maybe this update should leave a trace of light behind. I wanted to quietly fold that experience back into the game, to let it show that things can move forward, even from something that once felt stuck forever. That's why I've decided to add one more new thing to the update that goes beyond your normal quality of life stuff. And that is an extension to the ending. So you know how the game is originally supposed to end in the special stage, with Sonic being trapped there forever and there's no way to escape. I know that many people thought there was a way to escape by collecting those out-of-bounds Chaos Emeralds, but of course that doesn't work. And I actually feel kind of bad for the people who've wasted who knows how many hours on these out-of-bounds Chaos Emeralds in the vain hopes that they would do anything at all. But they don't. So now in the new update you can actually escape the special stage purgatory. You collect one of these out-of-bounds Chaos Emeralds and you're free. And doing this will let you play the April Fool's sequel Sonic is Still Alone that I released earlier this year, together with Sonic's overly happy sprites giving 2 thumbs up. I'm aware it definitely messes a bit with the whole spooky vibe of the hack, but I think it's a fitting conclusion to reflect how my life has changed for the better over the past year. And after all, Sonic.exe is all about myself, so the more I thought about it, the more it felt right to include. In a strange way, that feels like the most fitting ending to this project overall. It started as something born from pain, turned into reflection, and now somehow it circles back to creation again. Still imperfect, still human, but a little lighter than before. And maybe that's all I ever wanted from it. Anyway, I think I can really leave you at that now. Thank you so much again for watching. Have a happy Halloween, and I really hope this will be the last chapter of Sonic is Alone that needs to be told. Take care, and bye-bye.